Afrei Sadik Hey, Sif Dalet, Chayiv Lishloach Lechaveroi, Shtei Nois Basar. This is, of course, the halacha of Mishloach Manos, and the wording of the Shulchan Aruch here is very important, and in my opinion, very misunderstood before we even begin. Chayiv Lishloach Lechaveroi, you have to send Mishloach Manos. What do you have to send? Shtei Nois Basar, or Shnei Minei Acholim. You have to send one Mishloach Manos to one person, and that Mishloach Manos have to have in it manos. Shenamar u'mishloach manos ish l'reyehu. Shtei manos le'ish echad. So says the Shulchan Aruch. You have to send two manos to one person. You don't have to send two Mishloach Manos like many people think, but rather shtei manos le'ish echad. But if you look at the Shulchan Aruch carefully, it says Chayiv l'shloach lechaver shtei manos basar. Now we somehow have adopted a chumrah or a minhag or something to make sure you have two different kind of foods that you sell that you send in the Mishloach Manos. You know, a bottle of wine and a bar of chocolate. But that's not what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Shulchan Aruch says Chayiv l'shloach lechaver shtei manos basar. That normally maybe I'd send you a gift, I'd send you over a steak. But the Kavod Purim, I should send you two steaks.
What?
Sorry, just muting everybody. What we're talking about here is not two manos, two different minim. It doesn't say two minim. It says shtei manos basar. It means a double portion. So normally, let's say I'm making a barbecue, I'll send you over a hamburger. Okay, that's very nice. But l'kavod Purim, I should send you two hamburgers. Is this clear to everybody? Just want to make the point of this halacha, that there is no, like we say, well, there has to be two different brachos, maybe a shahakol and a mazonos, or a mazonos and a hagafen. There's no such thing in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't talk about that at all. It just talks about a double portion, like the man on Shabbos was a double portion. The Rabbi says simcha, send two manos. The Mishmeres says, minei acholim v'loy begadim. You can't be yotze this by sending begadim, ushari dvarim, or other things. So I can't send you like two new tires for your car, or two new scarves or pairs of gloves. It has to be food. There's something about food, and the something about food is that it's mitzarev to my suda. Like we know that the simcha of Purim has to do with suda, and I'm sending you something which is making your suda into a better suda. So l'chatchila, by the way, this is not what I want to speak about, but I just want to say this ha'ara, that you have to send, the right thing to do is to send Mishloach Manos of something which somebody is going to use in their suda. Bottle of wine is a good example. But when we're talking about two portions, it would seem to me that to be Mekayim the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, let's say you send somebody one bottle of wine. Zehu. Yotzei Mishloach Manos or not Yotzei Mishloach Manos? So the answer is, Yar Yotzei Mishloach Manos, because there's more than one portion of wine. A portion of wine is a glass of wine. A portion of wine is two glasses of wine. You have at least two portions. For normal people, you have at least two portions of wine, and Mishnah Berurah says first that hu adin mashka, shaper dami, the shtia b'chlal achila. Also, if you want to send two manos, and this is probably where a mistake comes from, you could also send, you want to send a double portion, there's a way to divide it up. I could send you a hamantash and a chocolate bar, or a hamantash and a Coke. So that's like a chiddush of the Mishnah Berurah here. The v'chein sagi be'echad oichel ve'echad mashke. The Mishnah Berurah adds, it has to be something that was just cooked already, because again, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to use it at your suda and not have to go cook it. The Mishloach Manos haroi miyad la'achila mashma. Okay, so first thing is, we have to understand Mishloach Manos is something that says in Megillas Esther, Mishloach Manos ish l're'ehu. There's only a chiyuv of one shalach manos to one person, because it says it in the Megillah Manos. We know that it's a minimum of shtei manos, but manos does not mean different types of food. It only means two portions. A mana is a portion. Is this clear to everybody? Just and then the Shulchan Aruch says, so should you limit yourself to one shalach manos to one person? No, the more you send, the better. So you should send shalach manos to as many people as possible, and you're mekayim the mitzvah. You know, I remember, like, as an aside, I remember years and years ago, when I was a yeshiva bacher, so in Kehillat Shivtei Yeshurun, like, a lot of people felt that the shalach manos were getting out of hand. Like, you felt the chiyuv you have to send to a lot of people, and, you know, and people didn't have that kind of money to send to a lot of people. So they went to Rav Scheinberg and they said, can you sign a letter, which will hang up all over the place, that'll say that everyone should limit themselves to one shalach manos or two shalach manos, or whatever the suggestion was at that time. And, you know, like, just let's make some takonos here because people are going broke. And I remember him saying that, what's he supposed to do? Put up a sign against the Shulchan Aruch? The Shulchan Aruch says, Chol amar to as many people as possible, meshubach. So you want me to say, no, it's not a good thing. It's not meshubach. So he wouldn't sign that letter. And Taka, but I'll say that, you know, this idea of, I'm just going to add this, that it's better to send probably to a lot of people, hareza meshubach, if you can. But to send crazy shalach manos is also not a big Indian to send. You know, I'm not sure about the themes and the poems and the flowers and all kinds of things which have nothing to do with Mishloach Manos. The idea of the Mishloach Manos is you send somebody something which they will get simcha from, and they'll enjoy it at their suda. And I think the Mishmeres says a little later that, you know, if you're sending to every person, it's subjective because every person will get simcha from something else. And the Iran says this mefurish in Megillah, that if you're talking about a nani, he'll be happy to get like a hamburger or a hot dog. Talking about an usher, he's going to want something nicer to take notice of it. Talking about a Rav, like the best thing is single malt scotch. That's the best thing to send to a Rav because he needs the scotch. Gives l'chaim to people, etc. Okay, so that's the halachah, and now I'd like to begin. There's a sefer called Piskei Tshuva, not to be confused with the those brown swarm that we have in the shul, Piskei Tshuvos, which is a contemporary. Piskei Tshuva was a Ger Chassid, I believe, from the previous generation. And he wrote like a bunch of beautiful things, little short tshuvas on many inyanim. So the Piskei Tshuva in Siman Kuf Mem, he asks the following question. You have to send two portions to one person. Agav, the Aruch HaShulchan in the same Siman Tov Reis Sadik, hey, he's the only one that I know of that says that there's an Indian to send two different minhag. But let's not go with that. That's a chiddush. To send two brachas. That's what he says. He says that's the minhag Yisrael. But let's just say I have to send you to be Yotzei Shalach Manos. I have to send you not one hamburger, but two hamburgers. So the Piskei Tshuva wants to know if I send, I'll read you his lashon here. Im sholach matana achas, v'achar kach sholach matana shniya, im mitztarfim. What if in the morning I send you a hamburger, and then in the afternoon I send you another hamburger? So I've sent two manos to one person, two chashuv things, two portions. So are my yotzei or not meaning the question is, and this is the purpose of this is not to figure out how many hamburgers to send somebody. The purpose here is to understand the essence of Mishloach Manos. That's the purpose of this question. So do we say that, okay, self kol self, I sent you 2 hamburgers, whether it's in the course of whether one's in the morning, one's in the afternoon, and I'm yotzei the mitzvah of shtei manos li'ish echad? Or do we say, no, there's a din that you have to send shtei manos? Like, in other words, normally I would gladly send you a hamburger. Kavod Purim, there's a certain simcha for you and a certain giving spirit for me to send 2 hamburgers, and that has to be done at one time because otherwise you haven't given Mishloach Manos. That's the question. Anybody want to weigh in on what's the svara, the 2 svaras here? Yeah.
Could you restate the question?
The question is, halacha question. I have to send 2 portions to one person on Purim, yes? What if I send them separately? One in the morning, one in the afternoon.
Well, probably the simcha. There's less simcha, or it's not special if it's just one and then one.
So if the issue is simcha, so maybe I don't know. Maybe like
or chashivas.
Maybe don't mix up your terms, Gil. Are you talking about simcha or are you talking about chashivas?
Well, I think the basis is a chashivas. I guess that would be more meduyak.
I don't know.
The other question could be: is the simcha perceived at the moment of receiving the gift, or at the time that the person actually sits down at their suda and enjoys it? Because it could be that if the simcha we're looking for is that connection point, which is the point of giving over the gift, then the double portion makes a much bigger impression. There's no question. No question, a much bigger impression the moment that you give it over.
Two portions
sit down and eat it.
Yeah.
That's sitting down to eat it is also an aspect, but seems less. I'm talking just based on the human experience.
Okay, so the human experience, I'm sitting down at my Suda, and I say, "Wow, look at what Rothenberg sent me. This is really cool." And my wife will chime in, no, later on, he sent you a different one also. And now you have 2 things from Rothenberg. So were you yotzei Mishloach Manos like that or not? Did you send shtei manos li'ish echad or not? I just want to give you like a little mashal, which is a Rambam that always bothers me, well-known Rambam. The Rambam asks the question, if when you're giving tzedakah, is it better to give a lot of different tzedakahs? Like I give you 100 shekel, you 10 shekel, you 5 shekel. Or is it better to find somebody, very important for us for Purim, is it better to find somebody who like really needs money and give them 10,000 shekel? What's the right way to go? So
I have a thought.
Speak.
I have a thought. One, when are we mekayim the mitzvah? Is the kiyum of the mitzvah when I send it, or is it the kiyum of the mitzvah when the other person receives it? So if the kiyum is when I sent it, so lichoira, I should be sending the 2 at the same time. But if the kiyum of the mitzvah is when it's received, then it shouldn't make a difference. As long as the person receives 2 manot, when he gets the second one, then I'm mekayim the mitzvah.
Well said.
Or maybe a third one is when you actually enjoy it. If they're both happen in the morning and the suda's in the afternoon, when you sit down, you're like, oh, here's 2 manos from whoever. Maybe that's a potential third point, because the fact that it's sitting on your table until you do anything may not as be big of a deal.
I just want to point out to you that what the Megillah says is that you're supposed to be marba and ava v'achva v'sholom v'reyes. So when you're thinking about this, you have to think, and this might be a lesson for life. I started to say the Rambam says, is it better to give a lot of portions of tzedakah or to really help somebody else? Says the Rambam, it's better to give it little by little because every pula is a mitzvah. So why not do 1,000 mitzvahs? So give a shekel, 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 shekel. In the meantime, you've helped nobody. Like you give them a little bit of pocket change where you could really maybe solve somebody's problem. But that's what the Rambam says. But the way I understand it, the Rambam's saying what's better for me. But if the Indian of tzedakah is not just what's better for me, but it's helping the guy out. Meaning, yes, in terms of a mitzvah, I've done 50 mitzvahs instead of 1 mitzvah. or two mitzvahs. But if you're saying like, and this is why the Ran argues with that Rambam, is the ikar of tzedakah is a little bit like you're saying, Ephraim. The union of tzedakah is not how much I'm giving, is that the other person is getting al yadi, because it isn't the mitzvah of tzedakah, not that I'm supposed to be giving, but that we're supposed to support the poor. So it's a similar question. So
Rebbe, can I ask a question? I saw a Rambam this morning on a Mishnah we were learning in Peah regarding giving out to Aniyim. Now, I don't know if this is just a diuk in the Rambam. He was giving out from his Goren. So he says, you've got a long line of Aniyim out the door. The Rambam says you have to give a minimum shir. Why do you have to give a minimum shir? He said, because it's got to be shtei sudos, enough to mahzik him for one day, that for that day is not an ani. That's how I understood the Rambam. As opposed to, let's say, if he came to your door in the middle of whatever, you can give him any amount. The question is here, we have to give him a minimum share so he's not an ani.
Here by Peah.
But well, I'm thinking here by Mishloach Manos.
But you're talking about Matanas Lav Yonim, or you're talking about Mishloach Manos? Because Mishloach Manos is to an ashir, not to an ani. So it's not exactly changing his status, Darren, from ani to regular, but it's give a guy simcha and let's create a better relationship. So if we wanted to look at it, as they say in the world of yeshivas balabatish, the question is actually what does create a better relationship? If I'm sending you packages all day long, or you get like a thing in the door. You know, I just happened to talk to somebody literally yesterday. So as a father-in-law was telling me that he wants to give his son-in-law money to buy an apartment, $100,000 to buy an apartment. So, what he was asking me is if he can launder the money through me. But he wants to give his son-in-law $100,000. So he said, but I'm not going to give the $100,000 at one time. I'm going to give him $10,000 at a time. So I said to him, why? Is it because of, tax reasons, or like, I wasn't going to do this anyway, but I already got curious. I said, why do you want to give it to him $10,000 at a time? So he told me that, he should appreciate it, $10,000, $10,000. Like each time he should appreciate it as opposed to getting a check for $100,000. And I said to him, like, with all due respect, why are you punishing the guy for? If you're going to give him the $100,000, give him the damn $100,000. Like, I really couldn't understand. Like, what was the purpose? Are you trying to achieve hakaras hatoyfer, or are you becoming the Rambam's mitzvah of every of giving a lot of different portions? Or are you helping a guy buy a house and you're giving him the yeshiva das to buy himself a house? So just give him the $100,000 and let him make the down payment instead of like, is he going to send the next one? Is he going to send the next one? So it's a little bit of what we're discussing here.
Just the other question that we'd have is whether if we're talking about two monos, so if he receives the first mono and eats it in the morning, then he gets the second mono in the afternoon and eats it, whether the chashivas is having it together or having just received it even one at a time.
Correct. So let me speak about that. Now,
Rabbi Haber, sorry, with Yaakov, when he sent the presents to Esau, he did it bit by bit, so to sort of make whatever.
To warm them up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Rebbe, I also wanted to suggest that giving it in two separate gifts, both, like the Rambam says, does something for the giver, but it may also do something for the receiver who says, look, I got a second gift today. If it's all in one package, okay, it's a nice big gift, but it's not the same as getting two gifts. So.
Correct, but let me just pull the other side out, which one of you mentioned at the beginning. I don't remember, Gil, that there is an inyan of a matana chashuva, not a steak, but two steaks, like on sale tonight at the restaurant. So the Piskei Tshuva says the following: Yesh Raya, I'm going to read it to you. Yesh Raya mehoitza b'Shabbos. Let's move over to the laws of carrying on Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. Dim hoitzi. Now, let me just tell you what I'm sure you realize. that carrying means you're carrying something from one rishus to another rishus, from a rishus hayachid to a rishus HaRav, or vice versa. Let's say it's a carrying deraisa. There's a shear to how much, let's say you have a crumb in your pocket. Is that carrying? No. So the shear of carrying is, who knows? Grogeres. A grogeres or a grogeres is a dried fig. A dried fig, a standard size, average size dried fig is considered a davar chashuv. And if you carry a grogeres from Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim or vice versa, you're chayiv skila. So what if you carry, I'm going to be smart, and I want to get that fig over to my wife. So I carry a chatzi grogeres and then another chatzi grogeres. So what's the halacha? So you're chayiv. It's Meforshei Gemara al Pi Rashi at the beginning of Masechta Shabbos. A chatzi and a chatzi, you're chayiv. Because they're mitzdaref. And why are they? They're only mitzdaref if when I send, but they're only mitzdaref if when I send the second half, the first one is still there. You didn't eat it. So what happens is there was, to put it in my words, there was a full grogeres in the Rishus HaRabim. If you found it on the floor, Gavalda could find a grogeres, and you took this grogeres and you brought it into the house, whether I brought it half or half, doesn't make any difference, but the first half has to be there when the second half comes in, because that way there's a grogeres in the Rishus HaYachid, which was previously in the Rishus HaRabim. That's the halacha. Comes to Piskei Tshuva, and he says, okay, so we have a halacha. The halacha is that I can send you 2 manos of Mishloach Manos in 2 different partials, chetzi and chetzi, but ala t'nai that the first chetzi has to still be there when the second chetzi arrives. So I could send you a hamburger in the morning, and then I send you a second hamburger in the afternoon, shtei manos. Let's assume that's shtei manos. But in order for me to be mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, says the Piskei Tshuva, in order then you still have to have the first hamburger nebuch when the second hamburger arrives, and if not, you're not yotzei.
Yeah, you're talking about Melechas Shabbos. You're talking about a Melacha of Hoitzah. It's a Melacha. That's the whole yesod of a Melacha, that you did a Melacha now. In other words, if the second grogeres wasn't there, so you didn't do the Melacha because it's not there anymore. But the fact that you did
isn't the Melacha carrying?
Of Hoitzah. It's a Melacha of Hoitzah. Now you have the shear of the Melacha of Hoitzah. So
Hoitzah means Hoitzah. So first of all, Rabbi Yaakov, you're correcting a international mistake. There's no isser to carry per se in the Rishus HaRabim. Hoitzah means you're mitzi from one rishus and you put it in the other rishus. You're in the house, you can carry a whole pile of books. There's nothing wrong carrying stuff. The idea is you can't change the rishus of something. Deraisos, derabbanans, but you can't change the rishus. So Rabbi Yaakov is saying that, okay, I have changed the rishus of a grogeres, and that's why I'm chayiv. But if I ate the first half of the grogeres, so I have not changed the rishus, at least at one time, I haven't done hoitzah on a grogeres from one rishus to another rishus. The grogeres which was once there is not here. Mashen Mishloach Manos, Yaakov. Let's just finish your thought.
Honest is well, either you say that's like Rebbe was saying, that it's a davar chashuv. It's a davar chashuv. So if it's a davar chashuv, when I split it, I lost that chashivas, or I lowered the chashivas by 50%. In other words, if it's a matana cheshuva and you need shtei manos, that means I missed out on making it chashuv by splitting it.
Right. Or even if you'll say, let me add on to what you're saying, that it's totally, that a portion that the Torah says creates a certain relationship. So would you agree that if you still have the first mana, when I send the second mana, that you're yotze?
So that you have to, I think that you probably have to make you have to be machali between, is it a chashuv matana, or is it something that the other person got, like they were clearing before? So
right.
I'm not sure I understand what this Hilchas Shabbos has to do with the hill of beans. I mean, so there's a lot of different malachos in the world. The Shinui Rishus, that has to do with Mishloach Manos. If I'm sitting in shul, I arrived at shul at Nate's to daven, and right after shul, I ran over to the Rav and give him a Mishloach Manos. I didn't, there was no hotzah. There's no hotzah. Who says that malachas hotzah has anything to do with this?
You see from hotzah, what the Piskei Tshuva is claiming is that you see from hotzah that half and half is good, as long as the first half is still there. So he's applying it to not anything to do with hotzah, to Mishloach Manos, where half and half is good. No, half and what he's saying is half and half is good, as long as the first half is there. What you're saying is correct. That correct is what the Rosh Hashiva said, that there's no comparison at all, because by Shabbos the malacha is hotzah. It is not a comparison, and the Rosh Hashiva pointed out 2 ways it's wrong. Number one, it's wrong because it could be that even if the second one is around, it's still not a matana chashuva, as Rabbi Yaakov said, or it could also be the other way around, and that is even if the second could be, it is good in 2 halves, and even if the second one's not around, it's still good in 2 halves, because of course you got simcha from getting to, what's the point of having the second hamburger when you still have the first hamburger? So the simcha is there's more, there's seconds over here. So what the Rosh Hashiva said a little more than what you're saying is that either way, there's no comparison. What did you want to say, Rabbi Yaakov Levi?
Could I add something, Rav Haber?
1 second, I think Yaakov Levi's trying to say something.
Yeah, I'm curious why Piskei Tshuva is letting this out from Shabbos. Is there any relevance to the Mishnah in Kedushin where someone is giving an Isha, he's giving her, I forget if it's dates or figs, and he's being, you're Mikudeshiously, Bezu, and that if none of them is worth a Shava Pruta, he's not Mekadosh her until the Shava, and if she's eating them. But if she's not eating them, then once the total reaches a Shava Pruta, then she's Mekudeshes, and that's what this discussion is. To me, that would seem more relevant than Hotzah.
Okay, so listen. So let me say something. A couple minutes. Ephraim said at the beginning, do you go by the no same, or do you go by the makabel? Mm-hmm. Is it about, that's one problem, one issue. Is it about simcha, and are we trying to define what gives me happiness? Is it about, which is very much about the makabel, but I have to have a moment of happiness or a day of happiness? Like how does this work? Are you punishing me and waiting for the second half hamburger, all the way till the afternoon because you're going to give me more simcha? So you can go back and forth on that. Let me just, I'd like to, as an aside, say something which I think is relevant. When it comes to Shabbos, so Tosfos at the beginning of Shabbos makes the point, he says, if you look at the 39 malachas of Shabbos, so Hotzah, which means Moitzi Mirashus L'Rashus, he calls it malacha geruahi. You see the Tosfos right at the bottom of the Beis Aleph. It's a malacha gerua. It's a malacha gerua means it's a shvacha malacha. It's not a regular malacha like cooking. It's a funny thing to say this is a malacha gerua and this is a chashuv malacha. You're really chayiv skill. Either way, you're chayiv. He says a malacha gerua, and he accomplishes some halachas by that in Tosfos, a well-known Tosfos. The Rishiva is masbir why Tosfos calls hoitzah malacha gerua, and he explained that when it comes to malacha of Shabbos, the whole concept is that you're making a change, a shinui, in the etzem hadavar. Meaning, like, I'm cooking something. Before it was uncooked, now it's cooked. And for one day a week, we're not going to make these sort of creative changes in things. We're going to acknowledge the fact that Hashem is the creator. So either cook it before or eat something raw. But we're not going to make that shinui. And the same thing is true with every malacha. Every malacha, the malacha of turning on a fire, you're boireyesh, you're creating something that wasn't there before. Schita, you're taking a fruit, which was a solid fruit, now you're making it into a liquid fruit. Techina, you're taking something which was solid and you're making it into something which is now granular. You're making changes in the etzem thing. What change do you make when you do hoitzah? I'm taking my pen or my gregeres from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid. The pen is a pen here and the pen is a pen there. I've made no change. It's the only malacha which no change has been made.
What about Sud?
Well, Sud is easy. You're taking the animal, and you're taking a free animal, and you're turning him into you're making a kinyan, an acquisition. But sof kol sof, it is a malacha. It's just a malacha grua. It's harder to understand hoitzah even than to understand Sud, because there's absolutely no creative aspect to it. Sud, so you've acquired something, kinyanim araser. But what happens with hoitzah? It's a malacha grua, but it is a malacha, correct? It still is a malacha. So the pshat is, and this is something that the Rishiva taught me, that it's hard to understand. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. He said that if you'd be a physicist, you understand that if an item is in place 1 and you take it to place 2, it's a different item. You've made a shinui in the etzem thing. However, nuanced and there's a difference. There's a difference between a potato in the store and a potato in my kitchen. And this might be the pshat God in Sud also. There's a difference between an animal which is out there and an animal which is not free. So the chiddush of hoitzah is that you've made an ever so small shinui in the etzem hadavar. You've created something that wasn't there before. If you can understand this on a metaphysical or physical level, go for it. But that's what you see from the Tosfos over here, that a shinui mimakom lemakom is not just a shinui mimakom lemakom. It's a different thing when it's here than whatever it was when it's over there. Hence your chayiv. Now apply that to the shear of gregeres. A gregeres, if I take it a gregeres at a time, a half a gregeres at a time, chatzi gregeres. So now have whatever this physical, this tiny shinui is, have I made it or have I not made it? And the answer is for sure I have made it. I've taken a Gergeris out of the Rishus HaYachid and I put it into the Rishus HaRav. And that's what Shabbos is all about. By the way, I heard this from Rav Scheinberg, but like Rav Hirsch in his explaining Shabbos in the 19 letters, this is how he explains it. The creativity is what's usher. Just tell you, Agav, just to take a minute of your time, that the Rosh Yeshiva didn't speak on Shabbos. Even Divrei Torah, he was very, very stingy on it. If you asked him a Shiloh, he would say like this. He don't speak, but he didn't speak any Divrei Chol. And as I pointed out many times to those that have been around me, is that they asked the Rebbetzin if it's hard to deal with, somebody doesn't talk on Shabbos. So she said it took her 6 months to notice. He's not talking on Shabbos. Talk anyway. But he explained once, which I thought was like mind-blowing. He explained once the reason he doesn't talk on Shabbos is not to do siguf, because you're not allowed to do a tainus on Shabbos. Not to do, but if you look at the Nefesh HaChaim, which we learn on Thursdays, Nefesh HaChaim in Shar Aleph and Shar Beis talks about how Nefesh Ruach Neshama, talks about how Dibur, every time you speak, you're creating all kinds of things in the Shemayim based on your words. When you daven, when you learn, when you just speak Divrei Chol, when you speak Lashon Hara, you're creating things positive and negative in the Shemayim. And we're not supposed to be creating on Shabbos. So that's what he said. That's why he doesn't talk on Shabbos. And even though Chazal didn't aser it, and the Torah didn't aser, that's because it wasn't one of the Melachos HaMishkan. So if it's not one of the Melachos HaMishkan, you can't call it a Melacha, but his chumrah is not to create on Shabbos. And I said, wow, that's a big chiddush. He says, no, it's not. It's a Mefurish Yerushalmi that you're not allowed to talk on Shabbos because you're creating things.
That's the Bekoshi Yitiru Shabbat Shalom.
That's right. Bekoshi Yitiru. Bekoshi Yitiru to say Shabbat Shalom. So he told me. But the Sugyos to the Nefesh HaChaim was the beautiful thing. So there's a lot to say here, but when we're trying to compare, and this is the point here, if we're trying to compare Shabbos, Chetzi, where the issue is making a shinui in the etzem davar, to the Indian of Mishloach Manos, which is not about making, or Kedushin is in between there, which I want to talk about if we have one more minute. But to make to Mishloach Manos, where we're not trying to make a shinui in the etzem hadavar, we're trying to make a shinui in the relationship. And if we're trying to make a shinui in the relationship, so it has nothing to do with Shabbos, Chatzi, and you can say, on the one hand, Shabbos, the first piece still has to be there. The first Chatzi Grogera still has to be here. And you could say over here, no, I'm making a relationship even if it's coming time. Or you could say that even though by Shabbos it doesn't have to be there, or does have to be there, here it doesn't have to be. You could say, there's no comparison one way or the other as you picked up, but this was the touch of the thing. Well, let me just say one last thing in closing. There's such a fascinating thing. There's a sefer called Ner Avram. Ner Avram. You probably never heard of it. It's a limited edition. And Ner Avram is a compilation of letters that are written between Rav Mordechai Savitsky, who was a Rav in Boston, and the Rogatchover. And it's a fascinating exchange of letters in Halachah and things like Matanas Aniyim and Hilchos Shlichus and all kinds of things these guys were holding in places that I wish I knew one page, it doesn't be enough. But back and forth, and the motif of the sefer is that Rav Savitsky writes a question to the Rogatchover, and it's, let's say this one, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long of fine print, and the Rogatchover answers with about 3 sentences. that's which just shows you how, and one of those 3 sentences is like, why are you being myrich so much? That's the first. So now we're left to 2 sentences. So one of these tshuvas he speaks about, which I found to be very yesodistic, and I want to just throw it in here. One of these tshuvas he speaks about gram kibui. Think about it for a minute. Gram kibui. I'm not putting out a fire, I'm not extinguishing, but I'm doing something, opening a door, and I'm being goyim the kibui to happen. Now, kibui, generally speaking, is a drabanan, because unless you're doing it to get hot coals and you're messing with it, it's a malach shein tzrich lagufa. So that being said, the kibui we don't do it, it's a drabanan. What about gram kibui? So he says a yesod as follows, the Rav and Spiritual, which I really not, it's a shir unto itself, but I want to throw it out there. The Welt says that the Rav and Spiritual met Reb Chaim Brisker, and he said that if you have 2 dinim, I have 3. That was his, and the Rav and Spiritual said that on every malacha of Shabbos, and for that matter, every isser in the Torah, every isser, you have to understand, and this is his words, very, very short words, whether the Rebbe Shalom is concerned about the poel, the peula, or the nifal. 3 possibilities. The poel, the peula, or the nifal. Let's say in English. The poel is me. The peula is the deed. The nifal is the accomplishment, the pol yotze. So let's say the Torah says, not allowed to kill somebody. Right? Everybody agrees with that up here. So you're not allowed to kill somebody. Is the issue that I shouldn't be killing people? Personally, it's like not good for me to kill people. Is it an issue that I can't do an act of killing that's like sort of the act is somehow a bad thing in this world? It's like a malach hamavas act. Or is it that the guy's dead, Basov? What's the nakuda? You can clear this by every single one of the shasa mitzvahs loisa say, and like one of the nafkaminas will be not in halacha but in Shamayim like attempted murder. So in such a case, I have the poel and I have the peula, but I don't have the nifal. The guy's not dead. So did I kill somebody or not? So certainly in court, attempted murder is not murder. It's attempted murder. But in like, do you go to hell for that or not? Attempted murder. So says the Rav and Spiritual that one of the nafkaminas in poel, peula, or nifal is whether grama is aser. Whether grama is aser, meaning if if the issue is that I don't want the following thing to happen, basof, like this shouldn't have happened. The guy's dead. So if that's the point of the avera, so you can say that if I was goyrim it, causative damage. So it's not really my damage. It's not misyaches to me, but at the end of the day, the guy's dead. Let me take this example, which is not quite as morbid. But let's say, like, I go and I break some. I'm angry at you. I lose my temper, and I cause you a loss. I flatten your tires. So, is there a difference between me going and taking a knife and slashing your tires, or putting some glass at the beginning of your driveway? Is there a difference? So it's called grama ben azikin pater. What's the pshat grama ben azikin pater? Because there, as the lamdanim say, there's an iser mazik, and it's true something wrong was happening. You might be chai b'dei shamayim, but it's not necessarily misyaches back to me. So again, there's 100 examples of this, and there's a lot to talk about. But I want to put out to this oilam here, this chakira. Everything you do, including Mishloach Manos, we got to think poel, peula, nifal. Where does it fall? And that'll have huge nafkaminas. We could write a book on the nafkaminas and Halachah that will have. in terms of tashlumin, in terms of ma'isa avera. What's Shalach Manos? And this is what's interesting. Do you need a shliach for Shalach Manos? Can you give it b'zeh acher zeh? Does the first half have to be Mekayim? Well, if the issue is that I should be giving the Shalach Manos, then it's an issue of pile, and it has Hilchos pile. If the issue is for some reason that the Shalach Manos should be given because when you see Shalach Manos flying all around the streets and going, isn't that beautiful? So that's the pa'ula of Shalach Manos. And Mishmeres, by the way, says, lest you think that that's absurd, the Mishmeres says that the reason why it's better to use a shaliach because it's marba b'simcha. So there you have it. Or the issue is that, I feel so good that Yaakov Pinsky sent me a bottle of scotch. Like it just, is it me? Is it you? Can you send Shalach Manos anonymously? Makes me happy. Can you, these are all the questions that I wanted to put out there in Poel, Pa'ula, and Nifal, and I don't want to take more time, so we'll pick it up in Mir Hashem next week. Thank you for joining me on this maiden voyage of something I've never done directly, which was to be chazer over and be mafalpul in the Toras HaRav.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, I'm here. You can go. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
May I ask a question, Rav Haber?
Yes. Who's that?
Pinchas.
Yes, Pinchas.
Okay, so I've been holding off ever since you first presented the Chakira of the Piskei Tshuva, and I'm really disturbed by the whole Havamina, the whole assumption of what he's asking. And I thought Marty was going to say it, but I don't think Marty went far enough. I have a very simple question. You know, when we're talking about Hilchos Shabbos, and even when the example that Yaakov Levi brought, when we're talking about Kiddushin, these are very, very serious isurim in the Torah. And the question of whether a woman is married or not has tremendous implications in terms of mamzeres if she marries another person. And the question of whether a malacha has or has not been done is a very serious question, because it's a question of it's also a diraisa. Does a korban have to be brought? Very, very serious issues. To take any analysis regarding components of an act that's a diraisa isur, and to make a mushal from that to a mitzvahs aseh midrabanan, which is, it might not just be a stam drabanan, it might be like divrei sofrim, divrei kabbalah, according to those musagim. But still, it's sachakol, it's a mitzvahs aseh midrabanan.
So why would the lumdus be any different? Why can't it? Why wouldn't you scale it down to?
Because all we've got is a mitzvah midrabanan, which is based upon 3 words in Megillas Esther. We're not talking about a diraisa. We're not talking about an iser diraisa. We're talking about an aseh midrabanan.
Pinchas, if you're asking, I think you're not thinking about it correctly. Everything. Once you have a concept, then it applies to everything. So if the concept by Shabbos, for instance, is half and half equals whole, or half and half does not equal whole, that's going to be true with the minhag. It's going to be true with the drabanan. It's going to be true everywhere, unless there's a difference. But which is what we're talking about. But the difference is not ever in the chomer hadavar. That's not the case. Let me say it like this: like when you say, you would be right if we would say that I'm giving half a pruta to an isha, now I'm giving another half a pruta. So I said, look, safek deraisa l'chomer, safek mamzer, let's be choishish in the kedushin. Okay, that's not what it says. If we're saying that a half and a half is a good kedushin on that side of the machlekes, is a good kedushin, it's a good kedushin. Meaning that the Nasina doesn't have to be basachas. So there you can say, as the Gemara asks, basar noisinu makabel azlina or basar pruta azlina. The Gemara has exactly those words. But once you know that it's basar noisinu makabel, and by the way, Yaakov Levi, I think that the Piskei Tshuva would have been better off bringing kedushin than bringing Shabbos, as a matter of fact. But I don't know that the difference is, I don't know if anybody calls a half a pruta and a half a pruta a chatzi shir. This is a chatzi shir. Like grogeres, the reason he's bringing grogeres is chatzi shir. Like it's an interesting thing. And by Shalach Manos, like, here's the way I would say it, ani hakatan. I would say that there's not a din in sending 2 manos. Hear me clearly, there's a nuance here. There's not a din in sending 2 manos. The din of Mishloach Manos says I have to send a package which is shtei manos. Like it's all one phrase, a shtei manos. Like you can call it something like a shtei manos. You know, like they can make a Yiddish word out of it, like a shtei manos. It's like the size of the gift. So half and half is not the size of the gift. It's not shtei manos. It's a shtei manos, if you can know what I mean. So that's my that's what I'm thinking, and that's why. Even though, by the way, the Piskei Tshuva paskins like this and is Madama to Shabbos, so our maskana here, Lefi Divrei Rabbeinu, is that there's no dimyan at all, and we still don't know the halachah. We still don't know the halachah, and that's not our goal to know the halachah of Shalach Manos, but just to think about the concepts.
Can I add one point?
Yes, please.
So in terms of Pula Nifal, he seems to be nemming on the way you're teaching him, that that it's the Pa'ula, it's a din in the Pa'ula. Or is it, or, you know, so L'chaira, how does he have a raya that it's, if so, that it's a din in Pa'ula, not in the Pa'ula Nifal?
Right. He would need a raya for that, and he doesn't bring one. It was a davar pashut in his mind, as far as I know, that it's a din in the Pa'ula. You're right. But that's what we're here to clear, those possibilities.
So that's a shtickle pliya right there, that he could. That's a basic problem with his tushtel.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for joining me. I'm going to go.
Thank you so much.
Have a good week.
Good.